think that most of us here, with a few exceptions, maybe down in this corner, most of us are a little bit old for picture books. And yet what we have got in our hands this morning is a picture book. And it's the greatest picture book in all of history. I wonder if you ever noticed how many pictures God gives us in His Word. And I'm obviously not talking about cartoons or illustrations, if your Bible has those, but I'm talking about word pictures. Little phrases that God's given us, and they stir up our imagination, and they help us to grasp particular truths. I mean, it's really kind of God to give us those pictures, because He didn't have to. God could have told us everything we need to know about Him, and everything we need to know about salvation by giving us something a bit like a dictionary, or a phone book, if you're old enough to remember phone books. He could have given us a book where, if you want to find out something about a particular topic, you just turn to the index, you look it up, and it gives you the bare facts of what you need to know. And that would have been an incredibly kind thing for God to do, but instead God has actually given us something even kinder and even better. He has given us a book which is crammed full of exciting stories, like the story of Jonah or the story of Daniel that the boys at camp are going to be looking at. And He's given us a book of great pictures. And those pictures, they help us to not just understand the message, but they help us to grasp the message. They help us to be gripped by the message. They help us to be excited by the message, and they help us to remember the message. And so it's wonderful that God has given us a book of pictures. And as we see from the camp prayer letter, this week girls' camp are looking at some of the most vivid and most simple and colourful, vibrant pictures in the whole Bible. They're found in John's Gospel. They're called the I am sayings. And there's 7 of them. 7 times that Jesus said, I am something. And I am the good shepherd. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. And this morning, and then this evening, with the camp, we're going to be looking at John chapter 10, verse 9. I am the door, or I am the gate. There's 4 things this morning I want us to see about the door. First thing, the door is a person. The door is a person. I am the door. Who is it that's saying this? It's Jesus, of course, but the question is, who is Jesus? Because we're not going to understand the picture unless we understand who Jesus is. And actually, we have got a clue in this verse. There's a clue in the very words that Jesus chooses to use. How does He begin? I am. I am. Now, that sounds totally normal to us. Now, I could say, I am a pastor. I am a dad. That is just normal enough sounding. But actually, all through John's Gospel, Jesus uses this phrase, I am, in a very special and a very clever way. And I'm going to give you 2 examples just to show that. And 2 examples as well, not just to show that this is true, but to show that the people Jesus was speaking with, they understood what Jesus was saying. So first of all, there's John chapter 8, and we read that already. And remember, Jesus is talking with the Jews, and He's talking about their great hero of the Old Testament. He's talking about Abraham. And He makes the point that Abraham was looking forward to Jesus, because Jesus is greater than Abraham. And the people argue with Jesus. And so Jesus says to them, remember, before Abraham was, I am. And now, if you or your children were to write that in their homework for school, they'd get a big red mark, wouldn't they? It's terrible grammar. It should be, before Abraham was, I was. Except, it's not that Jesus just hasn't quite got the hang of past tense and future tense and present tense. He is deliberately saying this in a strange way because he's making a point. And the people that Jesus was speaking to, they got the point loud and clear. Because do you remember what they tried to do whenever Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am? They immediately picked up stones and they decided, we're going to clobber this guy to death. Because they understood that what Jesus just said was blasphemy. I'll give you another example. John chapter 18. Just before the crucifixion, the soldiers, they come to the Garden of Gethsemane, they come to arrest Jesus, and they say, we are looking for Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus says, I am he. And then something really weird happens. All of a sudden, the soldiers fall down in the ground. Because something that Jesus has just said has filled these guys with terror. And what is it Jesus said? It's those two words, I am. And in John chapter 8, the Jews that Jesus is speaking with, and then later on in the Garden of Gethsemane, the Jewish soldiers who come to arrest Jesus, they knew their Old Testaments. And they knew that in the Old Testament, God had met with Moses at the burning bush. And they knew that Moses had asked God, what's your name? What shall I say to people whenever they ask, who is it that has sent you? And they know that God answered, I am who I am. Tell the people, I am has sent you. And these people Jesus was speaking with, they also knew what the name meant. They knew that God was saying, I am the one who has always existed. I am the one who, if you were to go back a million, billion, trillion years ago, you'd find I'm still there, and you're no closer to the start. These people, they knew that God, by saying, I am who I am, he's saying, I'm the one who can do what I want, when I want. And they also knew that every time their Bibles, the Old Testament, told them about God doing something, whether it was bringing the people out of Egypt, or sending prophets, or being worshipped in the Psalms, they knew that their Bibles said, I am has done this. Yahweh, or Jehovah, as we know it better. And now, here is Jesus taking the name that God revealed to Moses at the burning bush, and he's saying to these people, that's me. I am the one who's always existed. I am the one who is all powerful. I am the one who has rescued my people from Egypt. I am the one who defeated Goliath. I am the one who has been worshipped at the temple for all of these years. I am the one who gave the Bible, the Old Testament. And so is it any wonder that they picked up stones and were going to stone him to death? But then we get to these 7 pictures. The I am sayings, still in John's Gospel. We need to remember, John is deliberately painting these portraits for us. I am the Good Shepherd. I am the light of the world. And yet again, Jesus says what he says in a very, very strange way. He says it in a way that grammatically doesn't actually make a lot of sense. Grammatically, you might be marked down by your teacher if you were to write like this. And I realise it's not obvious in English, but it's a lot more obvious in Greek, which the New Testament was written in. But again, it's totally deliberate from Jesus. Because what he's doing is, every time he describes himself in this way, he's not just giving us the picture of a shepherd or a door, but he's saying, I am the I am. I am the one that Moses met at the burning bush. I am God, I am perfect, and I am worth listening to. And this morning, we are listening to the words of Jesus, the great I am. So first of all, the door is a person, and that person is God himself. The second thing, there's only one door. There's only one door, because there's a really important word in verse 9. I am the door or the gate. Not a door, not one of the doors, not even the biggest door or the most important door, but the door. And that's a really big thing for someone to say. Because this door, this gate that Jesus is speaking about is clearly incredibly important. So verse 9, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. So it's a really important gate. And of course we know there are many people who have many different ideas about how someone is saved. There's all sorts of different religions. And those religions have got all sorts of different gods. And those gods suggest all sorts of different ways of getting to heaven. And then you've got people who aren't even very religious at all, but they think that, well, if I can just live a life that is good enough, decent enough, if I can be nice, if I can be kind to other people, well then I'm going to be saved. And so they do, they live very nice, kind, decent lives. And Jesus says, you're wrong. He says to that very earnest religious person who's serving the wrong God, and he says to that very nice, kind, decent person who's living a very upright life, he says, you are like someone who's trying to get into a building, but what you think is a door is just a wall. Because I am the door. The only door. The only way to be saved. And he says here, not only am I the only way to be saved, but I'm also the only way to be happy. Verse 9, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and go out and find pasture. And this whole section, as you can see from the heading at the top, Jesus is talking all about sheep. And pasture, that just means somewhere where there's lots of grass and there's lots of food, and the sheep are going to get nicely filled up and they're going to be nourished and they're going to be happy. And there's a massive difference between the outside of the door and the inside of the door. Outside the door is rocky and it's dry and it's stony and there's not enough food to go around. But inside the door, well, there's as much food as anyone needs, and the food is as good as it gets. Inside is the place of happiness. Outside is the opposite. And again, lots of people have lots of ideas about how to be happy. Having a fulfilling career. Having a family. Getting followers on TikTok. Having a fulfilling social life. But Jesus says, actually, those things will not make you happy. Because there is only one way to have the sort of happiness that's going to last and isn't going to let you down, and that is to come through the door. And so Jesus is saying the only way to be happy is by coming to me. And the question that maybe is in your head is this: who does Jesus think he is? How dare Jesus say, you will never be happy without me? And how dare he say to someone, those things that you are trusting in are not going to be able to save you? Who does he think he is? It is an incredibly arrogant thing to say. Unless, of course, he's God himself. Unless he is the great I am. And that is what gives him the right to say what he wants, when he wants, and that is what means that you and I, we need to listen whenever he speaks. So the door is a person. There's only one door. Thirdly, the door is open. The door is open. Sure, you've been out somewhere at some point and you come across a door and you've got a sign on the door. and it says no entry, or staff only. And maybe just to reinforce the point, there's a little keypad beside the door, and it makes sure that you can't get in unless you have the code to get the door open. But what about this door? Well, this door is not locked. There's no secret code to get inside, and it's also not for a particular group of people. See that in verse 9. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. And that word, whoever, is absolutely fantastic. Now, you imagine maybe being in the hospital, and you're walking down one of the corridors and you come across a door and it says staff only. Let's say somebody's in a bit of a rush getting to their next patient. They've left the door slightly ajar, and curiosity gets the better of you. You really want to see what's on the other side, so you slip in through this door that's ajar, and I want you to imagine that no sooner are you through the door than someone spots you. What does he say? He says you need to get out, and if you don't get out, I'm going to call security and they're going to drag you out, because you're not allowed through the door. And if somehow you manage to get through the door, you're not allowed to stay behind the door. But that's not how this door works. If you want to be saved, and if you want to be happy and full of joy, all you need to do is go through the door. And anybody can go through. Jude is 10 months old now. Can't do very much. And he can't speak, he can't walk, he can't count, he can't write, can't do anything much really, but he can crawl. And you can be sure that if we leave a door open, Jude is going to find his way through. And that's a great picture of what Jesus says here, because Jesus is saying, listen, you don't need to be smart, you don't need to be gifted, you don't need to be talented, you don't need to have done all sorts of great things. You don't need to have grown up in Sunday school. You don't need to have spent the last 10 years going to church. You don't need to have memorized the order of the New Testament. All you need to do is go through the door. Even if you just crawl. All you need to do is come to me and ask me to let you in. And once you've done that, and once you are through the door, no one's going to ask you for your credentials. No one is going to say to you, well, wait a minute, what about all these things you've done in the past? What about all these sins that you've committed? What about all these people that you've hurt? No one's going to call security to get you out. The door is open. And Jesus says, whoever enters through me will be saved. Whether you're a young person or an older person, a boy or a girl, whether you're smart or not so smart, whether you're a parent or a child or a grandparent, whether you're a person with a clean life or a person with skeletons in the closet, whoever comes to me will be saved. So the door is a person, there's only one door, the door is open, but there's a warning. The warning's not in this passage, but the warning is elsewhere, and I do want to give you the warning this morning. Fourthly, the door has a lock. The door has a lock. So Jesus says, come on in. The door is open. But elsewhere he tells us, the door won't be open forever. Tells a story in Luke chapter 13 about doors. He tells us about some people who don't go through the door whenever the offer is there. Maybe these people think that they can come to Jesus another time. Maybe they're young and they think they'd like to live their lives first. They'd like to have a little bit of fun. Maybe they've got family and they know their family's not ready to come through the door, and so they want to wait and go through the door together. Maybe They're worried about what people in their office or their family or their school will say if they become Christians. Or maybe there's just something that they're not willing to give up. And they know that following Jesus means they're going to have to put that to one side. And maybe this morning, that's you. You haven't gone through the door yet. You think you will someday, but you haven't done it yet. Well, in that parable in Luke's Gospel, Jesus tells us there's going to come a point when he comes back to earth, and at that point, the door is going to close. And he says, when that happens, if you haven't come to him yet, you'll stand outside knocking and pleading to be let in. But the door will be locked. And so I want to say to you this morning, don't waste your chance. Maybe you're thinking, well, Jesus does sound great. And this salvation that he offers, it sounds great too. And maybe this morning, God the Holy Spirit is showing you very clearly that the door is open to you. But you need to walk through. And you mustn't put it off. Because you have no way of knowing when it might be too late. You don't know when Jesus is going to come back. You don't know when your last day on earth is going to be. And you don't know when the point might come when your heart is so hardened from putting this off that you'll never have the intention of going through ever again. Jesus says to you this morning, the door is open now. If you want to be happy, if you want to be blessed, and if you want to be saved, don't leave it to later. Because now is the time to go through.